Marcus Bennett, a 40-year-old black tech founder in Seattle, built his company from a college dream into a digital empire. Known for fairness and integrity, he secretly returned as a new hire under a false name to test his own workplace. What he found was corruption, abuse of power, and quiet discrimination. Treated as invisible, he endured it all, until the truth could no longer hide. When he revealed who he truly was, justice finally walked into the room. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe some heroes are willing to look guilty to save the innocent, this story is for you. His hair was cut short and precise, flecked faintly with gray at the temples, not from age but from responsibility. He dressed simply today, a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. He disliked unnecessary display. Marcus was the founder and president of Nexora Systems, a digital technology company specializing in artificial intelligence platforms used by hospitals, logistics networks, and educational systems across the country. He had built it from nothing but an idea and relentless belief. He rested one hand against the glass wall of his office, watching the city wake beneath him. Few people in the building had ever seen him in person. Fewer still had spoken to him directly. Marcus preferred distance, not out of arrogance, but observation. He believed leaders should listen before they speak. His story did not begin in glass towers. That was the first battlefield Marcus ever faced. While other boys played outside, Marcus sat cross-legged on the library floor after school, reading programming manuals that were already outdated. He was slim then, awkwardly tall for his age, with large, thoughtful eyes behind inexpensive glasses. He spoke little, but when he coded, he felt powerful. By 16, he had written his first functional scheduling program for a small clinic. Unpaid, unnoticed, but effective. But the pattern is consistent. Marcus walked back toward his desk, solid walnut, minimalist, almost austere. "Who oversees operations currently?" he asked. "Kevin Doyle." Emily's tone shifted subtly, not judgmental but cautious. Marcus had met Kevin only once, years ago, during a mid-level promotion review conducted via video call. Kevin Doyle was in his mid-30s, broad-shouldered with carefully styled dark hair and a habit of smiling just a second too long. His resume had been strong, efficient, confident, perhaps overly confident. "I'll review the numbers," Marcus said quietly. Emily studied him for a moment. She had seen this look before, the stillness before movement. "Marcus," she added gently, "there are also discrepancies in bonus allocations from that department. Small, but repeating." He lifted his gaze. "Discrepancies?" "Rounded figures that don't align with performance metrics." Silence settled between them. Outside the window, rain finally began to fall in thin silver lines. Elsewhere in the building, 15 floors below, Daniel Brooks sat at his workstation. Daniel was 27, lean and slightly tall, with warm brown skin and closely cropped hair. His features were thoughtful rather than striking. He wore rectangular glasses that constantly slid down his nose when he worked too long. He preferred hoodies over formal attire when dress code allowed. Quiet by nature, Daniel possessed an analytical mind that moved quickly but cautiously. He had joined Nexora 2 years earlier, fresh out of graduate school, drawn by its reputation for fairness and innovation. But something had changed. He stared at the email draft open on his screen. Resignation letter. Daniel valued transparency. Yet over the past 6 months, he had watched capable colleagues leave without explanation. Project credit shifted mysteriously. Overtime requests denied without clarity. The culture felt altered. He had never met Marcus Bennett. To Daniel, the president was a myth, an inspirational figure in company newsletters, rarely seen, often quoted. He wondered whether the man at the top even knew what was happening below. Back upstairs, Marcus finished scanning the numbers. He trusted data. Data did not exaggerate emotion. Data did not lie out of embarrassment. 18% turnover, declining morale scores, bonus inconsistencies. He closed the tablet slowly. "Emily," he said, voice calm but firm. "Prepare a standard open application listing for entry-level support in operations." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're hiring?" "Yes, for oversight." "For perspective." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're going in." Marcus allowed himself the faintest smile. "For a short time." Emily nodded once. She did not question his judgment. She never had. "You realize," she said carefully, "very few people in operations have seen you in person." "That's the point." The rain intensified, streaking across the glass tower like lines of code rewriting the sky. Marcus turned back toward the city. He had built Nexora to be different. If something inside it was rotting, he would not fix it from above. He would walk into it. 15 floors below, Daniel hovered his cursor over the send button of his resignation email, unaware that the man who could change everything was already planning to sit beside him, unnoticed. The mist thickened over Elliott Bay. And inside the glass tower, something had quietly shifted. The rain had cleared by Monday morning, leaving Seattle washed and reflective under a pale blue sky. The streets still glistened, and the air carried that crisp after-storm chill that made every breath feel sharpened. Commuters flowed into downtown buildings with coffee cups in hand, unaware that the president of one of those buildings was about to stand among them unnoticed. Marcus Bennett did not arrive in his usual black sedan. Instead, he stepped off a city bus 3 blocks from Nexora Systems, wearing worn brown shoes, dark slacks slightly faded at the knees, and a simple navy jacket zipped halfway up. He had trimmed his hair differently, slightly fuller at the top, and wore thin, rectangular glasses with clear lenses. Not a disguise dramatic enough to draw suspicion, just ordinary enough to erase authority. In his hand was a modest leather folder containing the resume of David Moore. David Moore, age 40, systems support specialist. 10 years of mid-level technical experience. No executive titles. No startup awards. Just competence. Marcus paused outside the revolving doors of his own company. Employees passed him without recognition. A security guard named Luis Hernandez stood near the entrance, a stocky man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and warm brown eyes. Luis had a habit of nodding politely at everyone, regardless of title. Years earlier, he had worked as a corrections officer before choosing a quieter life. He valued fairness deeply, having seen what power without accountability could do. "First day?" Luis asked, glancing at Marcus's temporary badge. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied evenly. Luis smiled. "You'll do fine. Just don't let operations push you around." Marcus held that sentence carefully. Inside, the lobby buzzed with low conversation and the faint scent of roasted coffee. Digital screens displayed Nexora's latest AI deployment metrics, glowing with quiet corporate pride. Marcus felt a strange detachment walking through it all anonymously. He had designed the mission statement etched into the marble wall. Innovation with integrity. He wondered how much of that integrity still breathed beneath the surface. Human Resources processed him quickly. The onboarding representative, Sandra Klein, was a petite woman in her early 40s with sharp cheekbones and meticulously straight blonde hair. Her tone was efficient but detached. Years in HR had trained her to speak in neutral phrases. She handed him a welcome packet without much eye contact. "You'll be assigned to operations support for now," she said briskly. "Temporary placement. They'll determine fit." "Operations support?" Marcus asked mildly. "Yes, we're flexible here." "Flexible," he nodded. 15 floors down, the operations department occupied a wide open office space with gray cubicles arranged in tight rows. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. The atmosphere felt different from the top floors, less polished, more tense. Kevin Doyle stood near the center aisle like a general surveying troops. Kevin was 36, tall with a broad build and carefully styled dark brown hair swept back with deliberate precision. His jawline was square, his smile confident but edged with impatience. He wore tailored suits even when business casual was allowed. To outsiders, he appeared charismatic. To those beneath him, he was unpredictable. He had grown up competing for attention, middle child in a loud household, and had learned early that dominance ensured survival. Over time, ambition hardened into entitlement. "So," Kevin said, scanning Marcus from head to toe, "you're David." "Yes." Kevin did not offer his hand. "We move fast here, no babysitting. If you're here, you work. Amanda will brief you." At the far corner desk sat Amanda Lewis. Amanda was 29, slim, with long chestnut hair cascading perfectly over her shoulders. Her green eyes were striking, but often cold when challenged. She wore fitted blouses and heels that clicked sharply against the office floor. Her posture carried a casual superiority. Legs crossed, chin tilted slightly upward, she had started as an administrative assistant 3 years earlier. Her relationship with Kevin accelerated her influence. While not officially in management, she behaved as though she were. Amanda looked Marcus over, lips curving faintly. "David Moore?" she asked. "Yes." She gestured toward a supply cart near the wall. "Good. We need coffee restocked for conference room B. Then reorganize the storage closet. After that, check with me." Marcus waited a moment. I understood this was a system support role. Amanda's smile thinned. "It is. Support the system. The system needs coffee." A few nearby employees avoided eye contact. Marcus nodded once and lifted the tray. From his desk, 2 rows over, Daniel Brooks watched. Daniel recognized something immediately: the way David held himself. Calm, observant, not defensive. Most new hires flustered under Amanda's tone. David did not. Later that afternoon, Daniel found an excuse to approach him near the printer. "You worked with server clusters before?" Daniel asked casually. Marcus glanced at him. "Among other things." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Your onboarding file mentioned distributed architecture experience." "Yes?" Daniel hesitated. "That's not common for support placement." Marcus met his gaze briefly. "Where would you place it?" Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "Depends who's asking." Before the conversation could deepen, Amanda's voice cut across the room. "David, the shipment from Baytech is here, sign for it, and hurry." Marcus stepped away without protest. Daniel watched him go, unsettled. Across the building, Emily Carter sat in her private office, scanning financial spreadsheets that glowed across dual monitors. Her posture remained upright, precise. She had tied her auburn hair higher today, a subtle sign she was in investigative mode. Patterns were emerging: small bonus adjustments, fractional deductions, approvals signed digitally by Kevin Doyle. Nothing large enough to trigger automated alarms, but consistent. She forwarded a secure encrypted summary to a private server accessible only to Marcus. Subject line: Phase 1 confirmed. Back in operations, the day continued. Marcus carried boxes, restocked supplies, delivered inter-office mail. He observed. Who deferred to whom? Who spoke freely? Who lowered their voices when Kevin passed? At 4:30 p.m., Amanda dropped a thick stack of printed documents onto his temporary desk. "These need scanning and indexing before you leave." "It's nearly 5, Marcus replied. She leaned closer, perfume sharp and deliberate. "We stay until the work is done." Kevin emerged from his office at that moment, jacket already slung over his shoulder. "Leaving early," he said casually to Amanda. "Dinner reservation." She smiled brightly. Of course. Neither acknowledged the irony. By 6:30, most lights in operations had dimmed. Daniel remained at his desk, pretending to finalize code while watching David methodically scan page after page. "You don't have to do all that tonight," Daniel said quietly. Marcus continued working. "I was assigned a task. It doesn't mean it's right." Marcus paused briefly, then resumed. Daniel studied him carefully. "You're not what they think you are." Marcus did not answer. At 7:12 p.m., Amanda reappeared from the elevator, heels echoing. "Oh," she said lightly, noticing Marcus still there. "Before you go, take this to the mail drop downstairs." She handed him a small envelope without explanation. As he turned toward the elevator, he caught Kevin's voice drifting from the hallway, laughing about keeping the machine running. Marcus stepped inside the elevator alone. The doors slid shut. His reflection stared back at him in the mirrored wall. Ordinary, unremarkable, underestimated, exactly where he needed to be. Upstairs, unseen, a quiet storm was gathering in spreadsheets and exit interviews. Downstairs, a capable engineer considered whether to walk away. And in the middle of it all stood a man, pretending to be small, in order to measure the truth. The first day was complete. But the real test had only begun. Tuesday morning arrived under a low ceiling of clouds, thick and unmoving, pressing Seattle into a quieter rhythm. The city felt muted, as though something unseen hovered just beyond the edge of visibility. Inside Nexora Systems, fluorescent lights hummed with mechanical indifference, and the operations floor buzzed with tension disguised as productivity. Marcus Bennett, still David Moore, arrived earlier than required. He carried no coffee, no authority, no sign of the tower's top floor. He wore a plain gray button-down shirt today, sleeves rolled to the forearms. The ordinary uniform suited him. It made people careless. Amanda Lewis stood near the conference room entrance, arms crossed, phone pressed between shoulder and ear. Her makeup was immaculate, her posture sharpened by impatience. "Yes, I told you, he'll get it." She snapped into the phone before hanging up. Her eyes found Marcus instantly. "David, we have a 9 o'clock strategy meeting upstairs. 23 people. I need 4 coffee carriers from Harbor Roast. Extra foam. 2 almond milks. 1 decaf, half sweet." Marcus glanced at the clock. It was 8:12 a.m. "That's a 10-minute walk," he said calmly. "Then walk fast." No one in the room reacted. Marcus took the company card Amanda handed him and left without argument. Outside, the air was cool and damp. He walked steadily, observing the city he had helped fund through Nexora's community programs. On paper, the company promoted fairness and growth. Inside these walls, something else was forming. When he returned, balancing 2 cardboard trays of coffee, Amanda barely looked up. "You're late," she said, though he was not. He placed the drinks carefully on the table. "Clean up the spill in the hallway," she added, gesturing vaguely. "Someone dropped something near the restroom." Marcus followed the faint trail of coffee drips to the tile floor near the employee bathrooms. He found a mop in the janitorial closet. The cleaning supervisor, an elderly Filipina woman named Teresa Valdez, stood inside organizing supplies. Teresa was 62, small and slightly stooped, with silver threaded through her black hair. Her eyes were kind but weary. She had worked in maintenance her entire life, raising 3 children on overnight shifts. Hardship had made her resilient, not bitter. "You don't have to do that," she said softly when she saw Marcus holding the mop. "I was asked to," Marcus replied. Teresa studied him for a moment, sensing something she couldn't name. "They ask too much from the wrong people," she murmured. Later that afternoon, Kevin Doyle called Marcus into his office. Kevin's office was larger than policy allowed for his position. Framed certifications hung on the wall, several unrelated to his actual department. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "We're behind on processing reports," Kevin said. "You'll stay late tonight. Data sorting? No need to log overtime. We're all team players here. Marcus remained standing. The policy manual states overtime must be logged. Kevin's smile flattened slightly. Policy manuals don't understand urgency. Outside the glass wall of Kevin's office, Daniel Brooks watched the exchange through partial reflection. He couldn't hear the words, but he recognized tone. That evening, long after most employees left, Marcus sat alone scanning documents in near silence. Daniel remained as well, pretending to revise code. "You don't push back much," Daniel said quietly, not looking up. Marcus answered without pause. "You don't speak up much." Daniel's fingers froze on the keyboard. "I've seen how that ends," Daniel replied after a moment. "How does it end?" Marcus asked. Daniel hesitated. "With someone else leaving." Midweek brought new patterns. Amanda began assigning Marcus tasks unrelated to any support function, picking up dry cleaning for Kevin under the guise of vendor errands, organizing Amanda's personal paperwork, even collecting lunch orders. At 11:45 a.m. Thursday, she approached his desk holding a clipboard. "Bathroom inspection today. Janitorial staff is short." Marcus looked up slowly. "That's not within my role description." She tilted her head. "You want to argue?" Her tone carried more than impatience. It carried testing. He stood without protest. In the corridor near the break room, he overheard hushed voices. A thin man in his early 30s stood near the vending machine speaking to a younger employee. His name was Mark Liu, a data analyst with narrow shoulders and nervous energy. Mark constantly adjusted his glasses when anxious. "I gave her the tickets," Mark whispered. "2 Mariners seats. She moved my shift schedule the next week." The younger employee, a tall woman with braided hair named Jasmine Turner, frowned. Jasmine was 25, outspoken and quick-witted. She had transferred from another department after clashing with Amanda. "So it's true," Jasmine said quietly. "You have to give something to get anything." Mark shrugged helplessly. Marcus filed the exchange away. By Friday, the pattern sharpened. Quarterly bonus announcements were posted internally. The amounts were modest but significant for many employees. Daniel reviewed his own notice and frowned. His project had exceeded performance targets by 12%. Yet his bonus was slightly lower than projected. He walked to Marcus's desk and lowered his voice. "Did you get yours?" "I'm not assigned a performance bonus," Marcus replied evenly. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Figures." Later that afternoon, Robert Hayes approached Marcus near the storage room. Robert was 60 years old, tall but slightly bent at the shoulders from decades of desk work. His hair was white and thinning, his face lined with deep creases that spoke of long years and longer patience. He wore old-fashioned cardigans and polished shoes, even in casual settings. Robert had joined Nexora during its early expansion, back when Marcus personally interviewed most hires. "You're new," Robert said quietly. "Yes." Robert glanced around before continuing. "It wasn't always like this." Marcus leaned against a shelf of printer paper. "Like what?" "Fearful." Robert's voice lowered. "When we started, bonuses were transparent. Leadership was visible. We knew who we worked for." "And now?" Robert sighed. "Now we work for whoever stands closest." He paused, studying Marcus carefully. "You remind me of someone," Robert added. Marcus held his gaze but said nothing. Across the building, Emily Carter worked late in her office, the city lights reflecting in her window. She reviewed a deeper audit trail that IT quietly granted her access to under executive authority. Patterns in the bonus disbursement logs showed subtle alterations before submission to upper management. The digital signatures traced back to Kevin's credentials, but also showed secondary approval codes linked to Amanda's workstation. She compiled the findings into a secure report. Subject line: Bonus allocation variance confirmed. Back in operations, Friday ended with another small humiliation. Amanda handed Marcus a sealed envelope. "Deliver this to payroll before they close." He glanced at the timestamp. It was already 4:55 p.m. Payroll closed at 5. He walked swiftly but calmly through the corridor. On his return, he passed Kevin laughing with Amanda near the elevator. "We're efficient," Kevin was saying. "Upper management never questions numbers if they look clean." Amanda smirked. "That's because they don't see down here." Marcus stepped past them unnoticed. That evening, Daniel sat at his desk long after closing, staring at spreadsheets he had quietly copied to a personal drive. Mark Liu hovered nearby, nervous. "You think it's coordinated?" Mark asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's not random." In the janitorial closet, Teresa locked her supply cabinet and glanced toward the darkened cubicles. She had seen many managers come and go, but something about the quiet new man who mopped without complaint unsettled her, in a hopeful way. As the week ended, the operations floor felt heavier than before. Coffee cups, closed office doors, whispered exchanges, slightly altered numbers. Marcus walked out of the building beneath a sky thick with gathering rain clouds. He had seen enough to confirm what the numbers suggested: pressure, manipulation, quiet coercion. But he had not yet moved. Not yet. The corridor lights flickered off one by one behind him, and somewhere within Nexera Systems, the difference between policy and practice widened just a little more. The door to the truth remained closed. For now, Friday evening settled over Seattle with a slow-burning sunset, streaks of orange bleeding through a sky that had been gray all week. The glass surface of Nexera Systems reflected the fading light like a silent witness. Most employees had already left, eager for weekend relief. But on the operations floor, tension lingered like humidity before a storm. Marcus, still known as David Moore, remained at his temporary desk, organizing digital files Amanda had reassigned to him without explanation. The office was quieter now. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A vacuum cleaner buzzed faintly in the distance where Teresa worked her final rounds. At 6:40 p.m., Marcus rose to return a stack of folders to the storage cabinet near the elevator bay. That was when he saw them. Kevin Doyle stood near the private executive parking entrance, jacket slung confidently over one shoulder. Amanda Lewis stood beside him, adjusting her coat in the reflective surface of a black sedan parked in a reserved space. Marcus recognized the vehicle immediately. It was a sleek, midnight blue Tesla Model S, registered under Nexera Systems' executive fleet assigned exclusively to the president. His car. Kevin clicked the key fob casually, and the headlights flashed to life. Amanda laughed lightly. "I still can't believe they let you access this." Kevin smirked. "They don't let me. I manage the floor. Upper management doesn't pay attention to details." Amanda slid into the passenger seat gracefully, crossing her legs. "And the boss?" she asked teasingly. "You think he even knows what's happening down here?" Kevin shrugged, climbing into the driver's seat. "That man lives in spreadsheets. He's probably in some private lounge sipping wine." Marcus stood just far enough in shadow to remain unnoticed. Kevin revved the engine slightly, the hum smooth and confident. "Relax," he added. "He never shows up." The Tesla pulled smoothly out of the reserved spot and disappeared into the descending parking ramp. Marcus remained still for several seconds. Not anger, not yet. Observation. Upstairs, Emily Carter sat alone in her dim office, illuminated by the glow of her monitor. The city skyline flickered behind her. She had loosened her ponytail, allowing auburn strands to fall around her shoulders, a sign of long hours. Her face, usually composed, was tight with concentration. She had widened the scope of her internal audit beyond bonuses. The Employee Welfare Fund, a discretionary pool allocated for emergency support, medical assistance, and hardship grants, showed irregular withdrawals over the past 6 months. Small increments at first, then increasing. The authorization codes linked to Kevin Doyle's executive override privileges. Emily leaned back slowly, fingers steepled. She had known Marcus long enough to understand what this meant. This was no longer a management issue. It was theft. Meanwhile, 2 floors below operations, Daniel Brooks sat alone in a dimly lit conference room. His laptop screen reflected sharply against his glasses. He had spent the evening tracing metadata on internal emails. Daniel was methodical by nature. He spoke little, but when he focused, he became relentless. He opened an archived thread titled Quarterly Adjustment Review. The conversation between Kevin and Amanda was short but damning. "Round it down," Kevin had written. Amanda replied, "Already done. Updated before submission." Daniel's jaw tightened. He saved the thread to an encrypted flash drive he carried on his keychain, a simple black device attached beside a worn silver ring his father had given him before passing away. Daniel's father had worked in manufacturing his entire life, believing integrity mattered more than title. Daniel had inherited that belief. Monday morning arrived colder than expected. A thin frost clung to the sidewalks outside Nexora Systems. Inside operations, Amanda stood beside Marcus's desk, holding a thick binder. "I need this converted into a digital performance report by noon," she said briskly. Marcus glanced at the binder. It contained technical summaries requiring advanced system analysis, work well beyond clerical support. "Is this assigned to you?" he asked calmly. Amanda's lips curved faintly. "It is now." "And your name will appear on it?" She leaned closer. "You're new. This is how you build goodwill." Marcus opened the binder without protest. The report was complex, requiring evaluation of back-end AI performance metrics and predictive algorithm calibration. Amanda lacked the technical training to complete it herself. He worked efficiently. From across the room, Jasmine Turner observed the exchange. Jasmine's tall frame leaned against her cubicle wall, arms crossed. Her braids were tied high today, accentuating her sharp cheekbones. She had once challenged Amanda directly over scheduling inequities and paid for it with undesirable shifts for 2 months. Now she watched silently. By 11:48 a.m., Marcus finished the report. He formatted it professionally, clean and precise. Amanda took the tablet from his hands without acknowledgement. "Leave it on my desk," she said. "I'll submit it." That afternoon, an internal announcement circulated. Subject: Operations Efficiency Improvement Report, submitted by Amanda Lewis. Marcus read it quietly. Daniel read it too. Daniel walked toward Marcus's desk. "You wrote that," Daniel said under his breath. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Did I?" Daniel's eyes sharpened. "You're either the most patient man alive or something else." Before Marcus could respond, Kevin emerged from his office. "Team meeting in 10 minutes," he called loudly. Inside the conference room, Kevin stood at the head of the table. Amanda sat beside him, legs crossed, posture composed. "We've improved efficiency this quarter," Kevin began confidently. "Thanks to Amanda's initiative." Amanda smiled modestly. Marcus observed every reaction in the room. Robert Hayes looked down at his hands. Mark Liu avoided eye contact. Jasmine stared directly at Kevin, unblinking. After the meeting, as employees filtered out, Robert approached Marcus quietly. "You know," Robert said in a low voice, "when the company started, the founder used to walk the floor, talk to people, knew our names." Marcus looked at him carefully. "You met him?" "Once," Robert said. "He shook my hand, asked about my daughter's college application. That kind of thing stays with you." Robert's voice carried a note of longing. "I hope he still cares?" he added softly. Marcus held his gaze. "What makes you think he doesn't?" Robert hesitated. "Because if he knew, this wouldn't happen." That evening, as Marcus left the building again, he paused in the parking garage. The executive spot where his Tesla had been taken now sat empty. He studied the concrete floor. Kevin and Amanda had grown careless. Not just entitled, careless. Upstairs, Emily finalized her compiled audit file. Bonus discrepancies, welfare fund withdrawals, unauthorized override codes. She encrypted the report and labeled it. Full internal review, pending. Daniel returned home late that night to his small apartment overlooking Lake Union. His cat, a gray tabby named Atlas, greeted him at the door. Atlas was 5 years old, slightly overweight, with curious yellow eyes and a habit of circling Daniel's legs when sensing stress. Daniel knelt and scratched behind Atlas's ears. "I think something big is happening," he murmured. Atlas purred indifferently. Back at Nexora, Amanda closed her laptop and glanced at Kevin. "You really think the president doesn't care?" she asked lightly. Kevin leaned back in his chair. "If he cared, he'd be here." The words hung in the air. Marcus stood alone near the elevator bank, listening unseen. The injustice had reached its peak, not because of shouting or confrontation, but because of assumption. They believed absence meant permission. They believed silence meant weakness. And they believed the man who built Nexora Systems would never stand on this floor unnoticed. Marcus pressed the elevator button. The doors slid open. The next move would not be impulsive. It would be deliberate. The borrowed car, the stolen credit, the altered funds, all observed, all recorded. The elevator doors closed quietly, and for the first time since walking into operations as David Moore, Marcus felt the line between patience and action growing thin. Wednesday arrived with a hard, clear sky over Seattle, the kind that followed a week of rain and made every building edge look sharper than usual. Sunlight struck the glass tower of Nexora Systems and turned it into a mirror, reflecting the city back at itself. Inside, however, the air in operations felt tight, like a room sealed too long without fresh oxygen. Marcus Bennett, still wearing the identity of David Moore, had spent 3 full weeks inside the department. 3 weeks of coffee runs, late nights without overtime approval, silent observations, and carefully stored evidence. He had not rushed. He had not reacted. He had watched. This morning, Kevin Doyle had called for a full departmental meeting. Mandatory attendance, the calendar invite read. The conference room filled quickly. Long, rectangular table, frosted glass walls, a projector humming faintly overhead. Amanda Lewis sat at Kevin's right, dressed in a fitted ivory blouse and dark pencil skirt, posture straight, chin lifted. Her expression held that same polished confidence she wore when presenting work that was not hers. Marcus took a seat near the far end of the table. Daniel Brooks sat 2 chairs away, shoulders slightly tense. He carried his laptop with him, though meetings rarely required it. The black encrypted flash drive rested in his pocket. Robert Hayes entered slowly, smoothing the sleeves of his cardigan as he sat. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from age. He had sensed something building all week. Kevin stood at the head of the table, clicking a remote to bring up slides. "We're entering Q4, he began smoothly. "Efficiency targets will increase. Some roles may shift. We need commitment." He paced slowly as he spoke, projecting confidence. Amanda interjected occasionally, adding comments about accountability and team players. Then her eyes landed on Marcus. "And speaking of accountability," she said lightly, "we've had some new hires struggling to adapt to our pace." A few employees glanced toward Marcus. Amanda smiled thinly. "David, would you like to explain why your task completion times have been slower than expected?" Marcus met her gaze calmly. "Which tasks?" She tilted her head. "All of them." A faint ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Daniel's jaw tightened. Kevin crossed his arms. "We don't have space here for people who can't keep up." Silence. Marcus removed his glasses slowly and set them on the table. He folded his hands in front of him. Then, without raising his voice, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Amanda gave a short laugh. "Are you calling someone for help?" "Yes," Marcus said evenly. He pressed a single contact. The room filled with an odd stillness as the phone rang. On the third ring, a voice answered. "Yes, Mr. Bennett?" Amanda's smile faltered slightly. Marcus spoke clearly. "Emily, would you please join us in Operations Conference Room B?" "On my way." He ended the call and placed the phone back on the table. Kevin's brow furrowed. "What was that supposed to be?" "You'll see," Marcus replied. 2 minutes passed. Then the conference room door opened. Emily Carter stepped inside. She wore a dark navy blazer and tailored trousers. Her auburn hair pulled back tightly. Expression composed but firm. Her hazel eyes scanned the room quickly before settling on Marcus. She did not look confused. She did not hesitate. She walked directly to his side and stood upright. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett." The air shifted instantly. Robert's breath caught audibly. Daniel's eyes widened. Amanda's face drained of color. Kevin blinked once, then twice. "Mr. Bennett?" Marcus rose slowly from his chair. Without the glasses, without the slight forward curve he had adopted to appear smaller, his posture changed completely. He stood tall, over 6 feet, shoulders squared, presence unmistakable. "My name," he said calmly, "is Marcus Bennett." No one moved. "I am the founder and president of Nexora Systems." The projector hummed in the silence. Amanda's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Kevin's face flushed red, then pale. This is some kind of misunderstanding." Marcus looked at him directly. "No, it is not." Robert Hayes stood slowly, gripping the back of his chair for support. His eyes filled with tears he did not attempt to hide. "It's you," Robert whispered. Marcus turned toward him briefly and nodded once. "Yes, Robert." The older man sat back down heavily, overcome. Amanda suddenly found her voice. "Mr. Bennett, I had no idea." "That is precisely the issue," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. Daniel rose from his seat. His movements were deliberate now, no longer hesitant. "I have something," he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Daniel walked to the front of the room and connected his laptop to the projector. His hands were steady. Emails filled the screen, time-stamped, archived. "Quarterly adjustment review," Daniel read aloud. "Round it down." The room remained silent. He clicked to the next message. "Already done. Updated before submission." Kevin swallowed hard. "That's taken out of context." Emily stepped forward. "It aligns with our audit," she said calmly. "Bonus allocations were altered before final approval. Welfare funds were withdrawn under override codes linked to your credentials." Amanda's composure shattered. "We were optimizing resources," she protested. "It's complicated." "No," Marcus said quietly. "It is simple." He walked slowly around the table, looking at each employee in turn. "I built this company on 3 principles," he continued. "Transparency, merit, dignity." He stopped beside Amanda. "You assigned tasks outside role descriptions to assert control." He moved toward Kevin. "You denied overtime while falsifying bonus reports." He faced the room. "And you assumed the absence of leadership meant permission." Kevin's voice trembled now. "Mr. Bennett, we can fix this. We can correct the reports." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Integrity is not a report to be corrected. It is a culture." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We didn't think that I would notice." Marcus finished calmly. Silence answered. Robert Hayes wiped his eyes openly now. "I told him," Robert said softly, voice breaking. "I told him the founder used to walk the floor." Marcus gave him a gentle look. "I never stopped caring," he said. Daniel stepped back from the projector, relief mixing with something deeper. Validation. Jasmine Turner stood near the wall, arms crossed but eyes shining. The weight in the room began to shift, not toward fear, but toward clarity. Marcus returned to the head of the table. "Effective immediately," he said evenly. "Kevin Doyle and Amanda Lewis are suspended pending full legal and financial review." Kevin opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Security had already been alerted. Luis Hernandez appeared at the conference room entrance, posture calm but firm. Kevin stared at Marcus, disbelief etched across his features. "You set this up," he said weakly. Marcus met his gaze. "No," he replied. "You did." Amanda lowered her head. The door closed behind them as Luis escorted them out. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Robert Hayes stood slowly and began to clap. One pair of hands, then another. Daniel joined. Jasmine followed. Soon the sound filled the conference room. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady. Marcus raised a hand gently. "This is not about applause," he said. "It is about restoration." The clapping faded. He looked around at the faces, some ashamed, some relieved, some hopeful. "We begin again," he said simply. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, illuminating dust motes suspended in the air. The illusion had ended. The truth stood visible. And for the first time since stepping into operations as David Moore, Marcus Bennett stood fully as himself. The morning after the revelation broke over Seattle with a steady, disciplined rain. Not the chaotic kind that storms in sideways, but a measured fall, controlled, consistent, cleansing. Nexora Systems stood firm beneath it, its glass exterior streaked with water that seemed to wash away something unseen. Inside the executive boardroom on the top floor, Marcus Bennett sat at the head of the long walnut table. Not as David Moore, not as an observer, but as president. His posture was upright, composed, his charcoal suit immaculate. The calm in his expression did not suggest anger. It suggested certainty. Emily Carter sat to his right, tablet open, files neatly organized. Across from them was Thomas Green, Nexora's retained corporate legal counsel. Thomas Green was a tall man in his late 40s with narrow shoulders and a disciplined posture shaped by years in courtrooms. His sandy hair was thinning slightly, and wire-rimmed glasses framed sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He spoke precisely, rarely emotionally. Raised by two public defenders in Chicago, Thomas believed strongly that justice must be structured, not theatrical. "The documentation is thorough," Thomas said, scanning the compiled evidence. "Bonus manipulations, unauthorized override codes, misuse of company vehicle privileges, and internal bribery tied to scheduling advantages." Marcus nodded once. "Proceed," he said simply. By noon, Kevin Doyle and Amanda Lewis had received formal suspension letters delivered by courier, accompanied by notice of internal investigation and referral to state authorities for financial misconduct. Kevin's reaction was immediate outrage. Amanda's was disbelief. But the documentation did not waver. 2 weeks later, the case was filed in King County Superior Court. The courthouse in downtown Seattle rose in pale stone and glass, understated yet imposing. Inside courtroom 4B, a quiet tension hung in the air as proceedings began. Judge Eleanor Whitman presided. Judge Whitman was 62, tall and slender with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a low bun. Her olive-toned skin carried the calm authority of decades on the bench. Her voice was steady, neither harsh nor indulgent. Years earlier, she had lost a close colleague to a corporate fraud scandal that devastated pensioners. Since then, she held white-collar misconduct with particular seriousness. Kevin sat at the defense table, suit slightly rumpled, confidence visibly diminished. Amanda sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap. The confident tilt of her chin had vanished. Thomas Green presented the case methodically. "Your Honor," he began, "the evidence demonstrates systematic alteration of bonus reports prior to executive submission, diversion of employee welfare funds under unauthorized override codes, and misuse of company property for personal benefit." Screens displayed email threads, audit logs, security footage from the parking garage, the borrowed Tesla. Marcus sat quietly in the gallery, not as a spectacle, but as a witness to his company's accountability. Daniel Brooks also attended, seated 3 rows behind him. He wore a simple navy suit borrowed from his older brother. His posture was straight, though tension flickered behind his glasses. It was his first time in a courtroom. When called to testify regarding the email metadata he had preserved, Daniel spoke clearly, not dramatically, just truthfully. "I did not alter these records," he said. "I preserved them." Judge Whitman nodded once. The defense attempted to frame the actions as administrative misunderstandings. The data disagreed. When the proceedings concluded 2 days later, the verdict was direct. Kevin Doyle was found guilty of financial misconduct, abuse of managerial authority, and unauthorized use of corporate assets. Amanda Lewis was found complicit in data manipulation and internal bribery practices. Sentencing included financial restitution, probationary monitoring, and professional disqualification from managerial positions. No spectacle, no shouting, just consequence. Outside the courthouse, rain fell lightly again. Marcus did not give a press statement. Instead, he returned to Nexora Systems. The following Monday, he called for a full company assembly. The main atrium, spanning 3 floors, filled gradually with employees from every department. Engineers, analysts, maintenance staff, interns. Even Luis Hernandez stood near the entrance, posture respectful but curious. Marcus stepped onto the low platform without dramatic introduction. He did not use slides. He did not raise his voice. "For weeks," he began, "I worked beside some of you under another name." Murmurs rippled gently through the crowd. "I did not do this to embarrass anyone," he continued. "I did it to understand." He paused. "When leadership is distant, culture can drift. That is my responsibility." He opened the floor. For the first time in company history, employees were invited to speak directly, without filters, without hierarchy. Jasmine Turner stepped forward first. She stood tall, braids pulled back, eyes steady. "There were times we felt invisible," she said plainly. "Like performance didn't matter unless you knew someone." Marcus nodded slowly. "Thank you." Mark Liu spoke next, voice trembling slightly but determined. "I shouldn't have had to give anything extra to feel secure in my schedule." "You won't," Marcus replied. Teresa Valdez stood near the back, hands folded. "I have cleaned offices for 30 years, she said softly. "I know when respect is real. I hope it stays real now." "It will," Marcus said. For over 2 hours, employees spoke, some with frustration, some with relief, some with cautious hope. Emily Carter recorded every suggestion carefully. By the end of the week, Nexora Systems implemented 3 structural reforms. First, a transparent bonus tracking system accessible to every employee in real time. Second, an independent ethics hotline managed by an external compliance firm. Third, a formal whistleblower protection program. The program was introduced by a new hire, Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was 38, medium height with shoulder-length dark curls and thoughtful brown eyes. She had previously worked as a compliance officer in a nonprofit healthcare network that collapsed after internal fraud went unreported. That experience shaped her deeply. She believed silence protected the wrong people. Her demeanor was calm but firm, her voice measured. "I am not here to police you," Sarah said during her introduction. I am here to protect you." The room listened carefully. 2 weeks later, Daniel Brooks was called into Marcus's office. Daniel stood slightly awkwardly near the desk, hands clasped behind his back. Marcus studied him for a moment. "You preserved evidence when it mattered," Marcus said, "not for recognition, but for integrity." Daniel swallowed lightly. It felt wrong to ignore it. Marcus nodded. "Effective immediately, you will serve as lead systems architect for operations." Daniel blinked once. "That's a management role." "It's a responsibility role," Marcus corrected gently. Daniel accepted. Robert Hayes visited Marcus later that afternoon. The older man moved slowly, but with renewed steadiness. "I never thought I'd see this place feel like it used to," Robert said quietly. Marcus smiled faintly. "It won't feel like it used to." Robert tilted his head. "It will be better," Marcus added. Outside, Seattle's rain began to thin. Sunlight pushed faintly through the cloud cover, illuminating the harbor. Nexora Systems did not celebrate the verdict publicly. There were no banners, no victory announcements, only systems corrected, processes strengthened, voices heard. Justice had not arrived dramatically. It had arrived deliberately, and it stood in the open. Spring arrived in Seattle with a quiet transformation. Cherry blossoms lined the sidewalks near Elliott Bay, soft pink against the glass skyline. The air carried the scent of rain and salt water, lighter now, almost hopeful. Nexora Systems stood as it always had, 40 floors of reflective steel and glass. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. Marcus Bennett no longer watched from behind mirrored walls. He walked the floors. On Monday mornings, employees now saw him step out of the elevator without announcement, dressed not in commanding suits but in simple tailored jackets, sleeves occasionally rolled up. He greeted security by name. "Morning, Luis." Luis Hernandez, always steady in posture, would nod respectfully but smile more freely than before. "Morning, Mr. Bennett." Marcus had made a deliberate decision. Leadership would no longer be distant. Within weeks of the court verdict, a formal code of ethical conduct was introduced company-wide, not as a corporate pamphlet but as a living document discussed in workshops across departments. The first pillar, financial transparency. Large screens in the main atrium displayed simplified quarterly metrics. Bonus structures were accessible to every employee via internal dashboards. No rounding, no hidden adjustments. The second pillar, zero discrimination. During an all-staff session, Marcus stood before a mixed crowd of engineers, analysts, custodial staff, and interns. "No bias," he said evenly. "Not by color, not by age, not by title. Performance will be evaluated by contribution, nothing else." The third pillar, no tolerance for abuse of authority. Sarah Mitchell, the newly appointed Ethics and Compliance Director, helped implement mandatory leadership accountability training. Sarah stood confidently during the workshop, dark curls framing her focused expression. She had a calm, grounded presence, but her voice carried clarity shaped by experience. "When authority is misused," she explained to department heads, "the damage spreads silently. We are here to prevent silence." She made it clear that anonymous reporting was protected, not punished. The fourth pillar, merit-based advancement. Performance reviews were restructured. Cross-department evaluation committees ensured fairness. Marcus attended several sessions personally, not to control them, but to listen. In operations, Daniel Brooks now sat at a desk that once belonged to Kevin Doyle. The promotion had not changed his humility. He still wore simple navy shirts and kept his workstation organized with minimal decoration, save for a small framed photo of his father beside his monitor. Daniel's new role as lead systems architect came with responsibility rather than ego. He began assembling a team for Nexora's next major AI initiative. Project Horizon. Project Horizon aimed to develop predictive emergency response software for urban healthcare systems, technology capable of anticipating patient surges before crises unfolded. Daniel stood in a conference room presenting the concept. His posture had grown steadier, his voice clearer. "We're building something proactive," he said, "not reactive." Jasmine Turner sat across from him, now assigned as Senior Data Coordinator. She nodded thoughtfully, appreciating the clarity of direction. Mark Liu handled analytics modeling, his nervous adjustments of glasses now replaced by focused intensity. Marcus attended the presentation silently from the back. Afterward, he approached Daniel. "You lead differently than Kevin," Marcus observed. Daniel gave a small, thoughtful smile. "I listened." "That's leadership," Marcus replied. Meanwhile, Robert Hayes made a decision that surprised many. Rather than retire as he had once planned, he accepted Marcus's offer to remain as a senior advisor. His role shifted from operations logistics to mentorship. Robert's tall, slightly stooped figure could now be seen walking beside younger employees, offering insight born from years of experience. His once weary expression carried renewed purpose. "You know," Robert told Marcus one afternoon in the atrium, sunlight catching the lines on his face, "I thought my last years here would be quiet." Marcus smiled gently. "They will be meaningful instead." Outside of formal meetings, Marcus spent time in informal conversations. He joined small group lunches in the break room. He listened to Teresa Valdez share stories about her grandchildren. He asked interns about their college projects. He reviewed suggestion submissions personally once a week. The culture began to shift from guarded to collaborative. 6 months later, Project Horizon entered beta testing. The demo presentation filled the main auditorium. Daniel stood on stage, hands steady, explaining how the AI platform processed real-time hospital data streams. Screens displayed simulations predicting emergency department bottlenecks hours before occurrence. Applause followed, not thunderous, but proud. Marcus stood in the back row beside Emily Carter. Emily had maintained her precise professionalism, but a subtle softness had returned to her expression. The tension of internal audits had faded. "He's grown," she said quietly, nodding toward Daniel. Marcus replied, "So have we." As the months passed, Nexora's reputation began to shift externally as well. Industry publications noted improvements in employee retention rates. Turnover dropped significantly. Anonymous surveys reflected increased morale and trust. Then came the invitation. 1 year after the courtroom verdict, Nexora Systems was nominated for the National Workplace Equity Award, a recognition granted annually to organizations demonstrating measurable commitment to fairness and ethical governance. The ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., in a large conference hall filled with executives, policymakers, and press. Marcus stood backstage adjusting his jacket, not nervous, but reflective. Emily stood beside him. "You deserve this," she said quietly. Marcus shook his head slightly. "We do." When Nexora Systems was announced as one of the most equitable workplaces in America, applause filled the hall. Marcus walked onto the stage beneath bright white lights. He looked different than the man who had stood anonymously in operations a year earlier, not in appearance, but in openness. He approached the podium. "We're honored," he began, voice steady. "But recognition was never our goal." He paused briefly. "A year ago, we discovered that fairness must be practiced daily, not assumed." He looked out at the audience. "We build technology, but more importantly, we build culture." He did not mention Kevin, he did not mention Amanda. Justice had already spoken. Instead, he concluded with quiet conviction. A company is not defined by profit alone. It is defined by how it treats the people who make that profit possible. Applause rose again. In the audience, Daniel sat beside Robert Hayes. Robert wiped his eyes discreetly. Back in Seattle days later, Nexora's employees gathered in the atrium to watch a replay of the ceremony. Louise stood near the entrance, nodding proudly. Teresa clasped her hand softly. Jasmine smiled. Mark adjusted his glasses and grinned openly. Marcus stood among them, not elevated, not separated. He looked around at the faces, diverse in age, background, color, no longer divided by fear. He smiled, not broadly but with deep satisfaction. Nexora Systems did not just produce algorithms, it produced accountability. It did not just process data, it restored trust. And Marcus Bennett, once unseen behind glass, now stood fully visible among his team. The company he built had survived not because it avoided failure, but because it confronted it. Nexora Systems was no longer simply a tech empire rising over Seattle. It was a company reborn. This story reminds us that leadership is not about titles, power, or wealth. It is about responsibility. Marcus did not prove his strength by shouting or punishing. He proved it by listening, observing, and standing up for what was right at the right moment. In everyday life, we may not run companies or stand in courtrooms, but we all stand in small rooms where fairness is tested. At work, in school, in our families. Sometimes we are the one treated unfairly. Sometimes we are the one who sees injustice and stays silent. And sometimes we are the one with the power to change something, but choose comfort instead. True character is revealed when no one is watching. Integrity is what you do when you think the boss will never show up. Respect is how you treat people who seem powerless. Skin color, position, age, background, none of these determine a person's worth. What matters is dignity, effort, and honesty. This story also teaches us that silence can protect injustice. If Daniel had stayed quiet, the truth would have remained hidden. If Marcus had stayed distant, the culture would have continued to decay. Change begins when someone decides that enough is enough. Let us carry this into our daily lives. Treat people fairly. Speak up when something is wrong. Do not underestimate anyone. And if you are in a position of leadership, remember that authority is a responsibility, not a privilege. We live in a world where discrimination still exists. But stories like this remind us that fairness can win when courage and integrity stand together. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs encouragement. Leave a comment and tell us what lesson meant the most to you. Do not forget to subscribe so we can continue sharing stories that inspire justice and hope. May God bless you and your family. May He guide you to walk in fairness and protect you from injustice. And if you believe that truth always finds its way into the light, comment Amen below.